Most people don't realize the colorful tapestry and diverse culture that is Israel. And if you could sort of get past the political barrage of black and white and just take a step back and look around, you'll see a spectacular view of humanity that you didn't think you'd get to see, all converging on one single street. Welcome to Jerusalem. After a few years of living here back around 2010, and the dozens of trips I've made over the years, I've made friendships, explored the land, and have discovered the beauty of the language. But what about the people? Sure, I've met a lot of Israelis, I've made a lot of friends, and I know that it goes much deeper, but how far? Well, I've started in the old city of Jerusalem to see how far back in time the diversity in this city goes. I've met up with Jeremy Collins, an old friend and tour guide who's agreed to show me the ins and outs of this amazing city. So obviously Jerusalem has a rich history, it has a diverse history with diverse cultures. Tell us a little bit about the modern demographic of Jerusalem.
Well, where we're actually sitting now, the center of the city, the meeting point of the four quarters of Jerusalem, if you take the Roman grid system, very nicely cuts the city into four. It's not strictly true, but it's a good indicator of the diverse population here. Over your shoulder, we have the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem. Armenia is the first Christian nation in the whole world. About 1,000 people are living over there in the Armenian quarter. Over your other shoulder, where the houses are more modern, is the Jewish quarter. About 2,500 people are living over there. 2,500 people in the Christian quarter over my right shoulder, and over here, and we can see it with the architecture, the domes, you've got the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem, about 32,000 people living in less than half a square mile. So very big, very dense, very diverse population of Jerusalem. The youngest quarter is the Jewish quarter, and the houses that we see here, I like to say they're exactly the same age as me, because the restoration project was completed in 1983. So they're very new.
It was a good year.
It was a good year, yeah. Were you born also in that year?
So this is one of my favorite places to come when I'm in Jerusalem. It's really just become a special place for me to just be, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the history here?
Yeah, I'm so glad you love it here. We're actually standing on these steps here on the Via Dolorosa, the Way of the Cross, the main traditional pilgrim road of Jerusalem. Millions of people this year alone will walk on the steps that we're walking now. And just in front of us, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the holiest place in the world for Christendom. In front of us, we've got this beautiful Jerusalem cross, right? The Christian symbol of Jerusalem. The big cross in the middle representing the city of Jerusalem, and the four smaller crosses representing, for me at least, the four corners of the globe. The building that we see, the magnificent building here, is largely 900 years old. But deep down underneath it, layer upon layer of history, Christians have been worshipping in this spot for at least 1,700 years, arguably the oldest church or the first church in the whole of Christianity.
It's amazing to see the colorful diversity in the city from the numerous Jews, Christians, Muslims, and pilgrims alike that have shared this beautiful and crowded city for more than 1,000 years. This overcrowding led British entrepreneur Moses Montefiore in the 1800s to build the neighborhood of Yemen Moshe, just outside of the old city of Jerusalem. This would mark the first Jewish neighborhood outside the city walls.
Obviously, there were Jews that have lived here, for thousands of years. But there was a wave of new Jewish immigration that happened in modern times.
We're not talking about small groups of Jews coming here to live close to the holy site. We're talking about people coming here to build a future, to build future generations of Jews in the land of Israel, escaping persecution in Eastern Europe, of course, but also fulfilling and pursuing this dream of settling the land of Israel. And they are settling in the neighborhoods that we see around us today, as well as all over the country.
The modern dynamics of cross-culturalism is amplified here in Tel Aviv Yafo, or Jaffa. Here you're going to find just about every people group in this country, all trying to make an honest living. I met up with Talia Spear, an American native, who since making Aliyah has made Tel Aviv her home.
My name is Talia. I live in Tel Aviv. I come from faraway land of Chicago, across the pond. I've lived in Tel Aviv about 4.5 years.
Why would someone who's Jewish want to come and make Aliyah and make Israel their home?
I grew up knowing that I had a home here. If I wanted to make this place my home, I can make this place my home. I didn't make religious Aliyah. I wouldn't classify myself this way. I didn't come to Israel so that everything would shut down on Friday night. I live in a rhythm that has Shabbat. I live in a rhythm that takes Jewish practice and Jewish culture seriously.
Right.
Sometimes to a level that I don't agree with, right? There's a lot of political fights about who should be allowed and shouldn't be allowed to drive on Shabbat or be open on Shabbat.
Which is maybe why you live in Tel Aviv.
Which is maybe why I live in Tel Aviv.
There's something really interesting about the place we're in now. It seems to be representative of this term Aliyah and sort of this idea of Jews from all over the world coming to the newly founded sort of Jewish state, But it's an interesting representation of our conversation here, I think, right?
Anyone who you find in Israel have walked by. There's your standard, basic Ashkenazi, what you think of kind of from Europe, white, looks a little bit like me. There's Mizrahim from more of the Middle Eastern countries that have come from Yemen, Iraq, Egypt, also Sephardic Jews. So they're coming from more Spanish-speaking countries that have a history that goes back to the Spanish Inquisition and needing to leave Spain and ending up all over the world and then coming and finding their ways back to Israel. So that itself is kind of a melting pot of tons of different types of people. And then as Israel continued to be a country, it's been more Aliyah from places you wouldn't even think of, like Ethiopian Aliyah, who came from Africa, this Jewish community in Africa, who Israel figured out and got them here. So now there's an Ethiopian Jewish community here who are also Israeli citizens, and which is awesome and beautiful and special, I think, in the history of Israel.
Aliyah is a Hebrew term which means to go up, having its roots in the times of the Bible where you would literally go up to Jerusalem. In this case, Jews from around the world have been coming back to the Holy Land even as far back as the Byzantines and the times of the Spanish Inquisition in the 1200s, where many Jews would settle in Jerusalem, in Tzfat, Tiberias, and Hebron. Though the largest Aliyah would happen as a result of the largest displacement of human beings in the history of mankind, the Holocaust. After Hitler's failed attempt to wipe out the Jewish race, a tired and weakened people would find themselves essentially homeless. Many would attempt to make the journey across the seas to Palestine in hope of settling. Following the United Nations resolution for the partition of Palestine, a civil war would break out between the Jewish and Arab communities. This would spark an all-out war, ending the British blockade on Jewish immigration and forcing Jews across the globe to answer the call to defend their right to the land of their ancestors.
So, Talia, earlier you were talking about Ashkenazi Jews coming from Europe. Obviously, we all know, I think, mostly about the history of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And so, how did that affect immigration to Israel? How did that affect, the people who came from Europe out of the Holocaust into the newly formed state of Israel?
I mean, after the Holocaust, there was massive immigration to Israel. And that was happening actually before the state. So those things were kind of happening altogether, where people were fleeing Europe and looking for a home and looking for a place to be. The state of Israel itself was only, like you said, formed in 1948, so
Right.
it didn't actually exist yet, but there was an idea of it.
Right.
So people were coming and they had just gone through horrors and needing to leave their homes and flee from their homes, but then also needing to find a new one.
You know, the Jews that are coming out of, you know, Nazi Germany, Nazi Europe, out of World War II, and then, you know, the state of Israel being founded in 1948, and then they have to come here, and then they have to enter a whole new war.
Yeah, they're here standing up, fighting for their own right to exist, fighting for their own right to have a state, to have a Jewish state.
There's like, it's almost like they can have some optimism, right?
Yeah.
That there's actually hope for a homeland.
It's amazing that there is optimism,
Right.
right? Like after so many years, and the persecution of Jews didn't start with the Holocaust. That had been building. Like to think of actually having enough optimism and enough hope to say, no, I believe in this cause. I believe in the state of Israel. I believe in what I'm fighting for right now is amazing.
One amazing story is that of the Ethiopian Jews, who have lived in the north of Ethiopia since the time of Queen Sheba and King Solomon. They've practiced a form of non-rabbinic Judaism over the millennia and have since mostly immigrated to Israel and have made a transition into Israeli society.
Emmanuel Roro is a first-generation Ethiopian Israeli. Born and raised in Israel, he's seen the struggles of his parents to integrate into Israeli society and is now watching the next generation of Ethiopian Israelis carve out a future in the ever-changing social landscape of this country.
You are a first-generation Ethiopian Israeli.
Yes, exactly.
Tell me what that means.
Just to be Israeli, I don't feel like I'm 100% Ethiopian. I don't feel like I'm 100% Israeli, but I'm 50-50.
Okay.
Yeah, but most of it is like, I'm Israeli, I'm born here.
Yeah.
Hebrew is my language.
Yeah.
And
But you still have sort of, you know, the Ethiopian culture and tradition
Yes.
because you live with your parents still, and obviously you grew up, and they had lived in Ethiopia until, you know,
Yes.
30 years ago or so.
exactly. So I have that struggle to, sometimes maybe in school, the tradition is different. Like the importance of education it's very different, but it's good because I was born to it.
Just different aspects of society. They're sort of taking it, feeling more ownership of it, being first generation, and then as you sort of have kids of your own and your generation has kids of their own, you know, there's more integration and more integration.
Getting the opportunity. I believe that right now my generation have many opportunities that it needs to take.
I'm on my way up to northern Israel. This is the only part of the country where the majority of the population speaks Arabic. This eclectic mix of cultures and societies makes up about 1/3 of Israel's population. The predominantly Arab city of Nazareth is at the center of it all, not only being the town where Jesus grew up, but also for being the largest city in the north. But what does it mean to be an Arab in Israel? To answer that question, I've met up with Reverend Azar Ajaj, an Arab Israeli and Nazareth native.
What is unique about the Arab community living in Israel?
Let me start with a little story that took place 27 years ago when we've been in our honeymoon. We got married and we went to Greece. And as we were there, I wanted to rent a small boat to go into the sea. And the Greek guy who was there asked us, where are you from? And as you said, my wife is from Palestine at that time, you know, and I'm from Israel. But this honeymoon is not time for politics and other things. So we said from Israel. So he wanted to show us that he's well educated. He said, "Oh, you're Jew." And I said, "No, we're not." And he looked at me, waiting to hear what else than Jewish people can be living in Israel. And I said, "We're Arabs." So to cover his first mistake, immediately said, "Oh, you're Muslims." I said, "No, we're Christians." And he said, "Man, you confused me. We're Palestinians, but Israelis. We're Arabs, but..."
Meaning you have Israeli citizenship.
Yeah, I'm Israeli citizen. I'm originally I'm a Palestinian, but I'm Israeli. I have Israeli citizenship.
From a broad perspective of the Israeli Arab community here, do you feel that particularly young Israeli Arabs have opportunities in this country?
Yes and no at the same time. I mean,
That's a good answer.
It's a free market, and it's and people could find a lot of work if there are unique people. If there are, and we do have many good examples in the field of high-tech, where many Arabs are leading their different high-tech departments. If we look at the hospitals, many departments in the hospitals are led by good Arab doctors, Jewish hospitals. I'm not speaking about Arab hospitals. So the wider market, yes, there is an opportunity, but I think many people would say that it's limited opportunity because you are Arabs. There is areas we cannot go in, which is probably could be true. Of course, the military areas, the factories, companies, Arabs cannot join. So yes and no, that's what I'm saying. There is an opportunity, and sometimes it's difficult.
In the Arab community here in Israel, there's this desire for integration, but probably also for, a desire for a distinct culture, because it is a distinct culture, right, in the Israeli Arab community, and that's a beautiful thing. So it's probably a little bit challenging sometimes because you want integration, but at the same time, there's this desire to keep a distinct culture, and I think that's important, right?
I think most of the Arabs in Israel are peaceful people. They're seeking peace. Most of the Arabs in Israel, they are, although they are Palestinian Israelis, they recognize Israel as their states. They're not asking to have independent Palestinian states. They recognize Israel as their states. They want to have a good relation with their neighbors. They want to integrate in the Israeli community, but at the same time, they're seeking out to have that in a way that it keeps their dignity. So the main focus of the Arab community in the country, with all its diversity, I know that it's different but it's still that these are people who want to integrate in the country here, and they are open to express that with their neighbors. And what I think that the people around us, Muslims and Jews, need to allow us to be who we are as Christians, because in the end, we'll be a blessing.
It's innate in the message.
Yes, let us be who we are, as ethnically, as religiously, keep us, and the result of this will be a blessing for the whole community. That's what I believe, especially as a committed Christian. Don't try to change us, but allow us to be who we are, because who we are will bring blessing for both or the whole country.
One of the most fascinating and secretive communities in Israel has to be the Druze. The Druze are an esoteric, ethno-religious group who believe that they come from the lineage of Jethro, the Midianite, the father-in-law of Moses. A surprising twist to this community is that despite their secrecy, they are the most integrated Arab-speaking community in the country, with many serving in the Israeli Defense Forces. Their success goes from brigadier generals to politicians, and even the largest baby store in Israel, which just happens to be in a small Druze town. It all goes to show that anyone in this country has the potential to pave their way to success.
I decided to head further north, to the Golan Heights, to the town of Bukata, one of 4 Druze villages at the base of Mount Hermon, on the border of Syria and Lebanon.
I was hosted by Nasiba and her son Amjad. Nasiba is a local chef and trendsetter who has redefined the roles of women in the area. She also happens to be the first Druze woman to get her driver's license despite years of resistance from Druze leadership.
זה היה מאוד מאוד קשה, אישה מותר ללכת עם אבא, בן, דוד, זהו, לא מותר ללכת עם מישהו אחר. בכפר זה אסור לאישה שתעשה רישיון נהיגה, אז התחשבתי מה אני יכולה לעשות, אז קיבלתי רעיון, אין לי כסף, מכרתי את הזהב שלי כמעט $2,000, ומצאתי מורה נהיגה דרוזי מהגליל, אמרתי לו, תשמע, אני רוצה רישיון נהיגה תוך שבוע אחד, תיאוריה אחד, טסט אחד, הכי חשוב שזה יהיה סודי בינינו. התחלנו מיום ראשון עד יום חמישי, מ-8 בבוקר עד 6 בלילה, יום ולילה אני נוהגת עד שחזרתי רישיון נהיגה. יש לנו מקום בתפילה ששם מתבללים ונותנים פתוות. אז הפתווה הייתה חרם דתי לכל בחורה יש רישיון נהיגה. מה זה אומר חרם דתי? שיהיה אסור להזמין אותה לחתונות. כל בחורה, תעלה עם בחורה נוהגת גם תקבל חרם דתי. אמרו, זה חוק אצלנו. למשל, אח של בעלי הוא דתי, הוא גירש אותי מהבית, אבל אני אוהב אותך, מכבד אותך, אבל מבחינת הדת, השיח' אמרו, אסור שאת תבוא אלינו, אסור שאנחנו נלך אלייך. אמרתי להם שאני מצב כלכלי על הבנים, רוצה לעבוד, הלכתי לחיפה, למדתי קורס קוסמטיקה, הכנסתי משהו חדש לכפר, הכנסתי קוסמטיקה לבתים. ולא יודעת מה זה קוסמטיקה לפני 28 שנים. התחלתי לעבוד בחרמון, קובעית ראשונה מבוקעתה, היה כל הפועלים באוטובוס, כולם גברים, רק אני גברת. בוקר, ערב, לילה, סגרתי כל החובות עם בעלי, ואמרו שאת גבר, את לא אישה. אנחנו נסגור העיניים בגלל שאת ממג'ל שמס. עוד 3 חודשים לקחתי אחותו של בעלי, השר שניגע. עוד 6 חודשים 6 בנות, 10 בנות, 20. היום, אחרי 26 שנים, כל הבנות נוגעות עם רישיון ובלי רישיון.
Nasiba's son Amjad took me closer to the northern border of Israel. Here you can find the only diplomatic coordination that Israel has with the country of Syria, all relating to the Druze community and their passage to and from their home here in the Golan Heights.
It's well known in Israel that it's very conservative and kind of secret religion. So everyone is curious.
Sure.
Everyone tell you, how do you live? Which kind of food you eat? How do you live in your family? What is
They
what
ask you
kind of
questions.
experience? Of course, everyone.
Wow.
Even when I was in Syria, like they asked me, oh, how Israeli looks like.
Oh, I bet.
And also here, like how Syrians looks like.
Now, you have a very interesting story because you, at age 18, you
Exactly.
left your village,
Yes.
and then you went to Syria, you went to Damascus, and there's a program that allows Druze from the Golan Heights to...
It's to Syria, to Damascus.
Yeah.
It's
What did you do in
program.
Damascus?
It's more a privilege, we
Yeah.
say it. Hafez al-Assad, the
Okay.
father
the
of Bashar
father of the
al-Assad.
current president.
Hafez al-Assad have an agreement with Israel
Okay.
about the people on Golan Heights. When they finish high school, they have a privilege to go to Syria to study, and then they come back to their village, or they can stay in Syria. And when I was 18 years old, I took this privilege because you got it only once, and or you take it or you leave it. So I
What
had
was
this
the motivation
opportunity.
that made... Why did you want to go?
My motivation was to expand my sight. If I couldn't see Syria for my whole life, then I would suffer from identification problem. So when I was young, so I said, let's go there at least for 1 year, and then if I didn't like, then I can come back. It was a year before the civil war in Syria.
So tell me about your experience in Syria during the Civil War.
Yeah, it's an intense story. I went there when I was like 18 years old. I was a kid, and I went there my first year, and I get accepted to a medical school. And it was before the Civil War.
Right before the Civil War.
Right before Civil War. And in the middle of my first year, the problems have started. My first 3 years, I was coming back in the summer here. But my last 3 years, I was continuously in Damascus. I couldn't take my
You weren't
days
able
off.
to cross the
I
border.
wasn't able in my 3 years,
Wow.
in my last 3 years, because the rebels, they have took the border in Enzivan, the UN border.
Being in the midst of a war zone, was your area of Damascus affected?
Yes, within minutes, a bomb. Sometimes you wake up and you open the television and you hear, oh my God, 100% died.
Yeah.
It was really frightening.
So you came back into Israel. Now I understand you live in Jaffa, in the Tel Aviv, Jaffa area.
Yeah.
What are you doing there?
So I'm doing my residency now. I'm getting into psychiatry. I've also experienced some fears, love in Syria. I have experienced many
Effects of it, yes, absolutely.
and then like I was touched by it, and then I was very motivated to treat,
to help others.
to help others.
The North has seen its fair share of war and conflict, often separating families and dividing communities. One of these communities is the village of Beram, a village of Maronite Christians on the border of Lebanon. This community became caught in the middle of the 1948 war, driven out of the village for security concerns, and have since been unable to return, despite several attempts in the government to do so. I met with Shadi Khalul, an ex-paratrooper in the IDF and local leader, descending from the families who once lived there.
To be a Maronite Christian in Israel or in Middle East has a very deep meaning for me as a follower of Christ, of Jesus, our Savior. of the early followers. That means I am from the early ancient Christian communities, or those people who followed Jesus in the land, in the Galilee, in the region of Antioch, and we still holding his faith and his belief and his values. We carry a civilization of Aramaic Phoenician civilization for 6,000 years in this region.
Shadi also took me to a nearby forest where he holds an annual youth camp. Here, they're trying to educate the next generation of Maronite Christians about their heritage and how they can contribute to society.
So we're here at this summer camp. Tell me how this is an important part of your vision, of your mission of preserving Aramaean Christian identity.
I decided that there is a need to do something for these people, for these youth. Instead of sitting at homes in summer doing nothing, we should gather them under umbrella of titling them as Aramaeans, Aramean Summer Camp in Israel. Here now, this is the 10th year anniversary of the summer camp. 35 first year, 10 years ago, to now 120 youth and kids.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's so fun, the music playing, obviously the ropes courses, the fun things, you know, but the cultural music that's playing, it's sort of traditional Aramaic.
Folklore dance, you know.
Yeah, folk dance.
Yeah.
And you have some students here who maybe didn't know these dances, maybe they're from other places outside of, you know, the community, but they have this identity and they're learning it. Thank you, my friend.
Welcome.
It's out here in the middle of nowhere where I realized that a good portion of this country is desert.
Literally in the middle of what seems to be nowhere. And usually when you see camels out in the middle of nowhere, typically you know that you're in the midst of a Bedouin community. And Bedouins are people that really, they sort of roam the desert. This is their home. And they know every inch of this topography. They sort of live in these tents and these what seem to be temporary shelters. And it actually reminds me a little bit of really our forefathers, Abraham. You know, we read in the Bible where he sort of brought his whole clan, his family from, you know, a faraway land, and they camped out in the desert. They sort of just moved as they felt, you know, to move. And it's really a similar community in that they're just wandering in the desert. And the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, you know, being sort of lost in the desert for 40 years. And then coming into the Promised Land. It's just so peaceful out here. It's so serene. It's such a incredible opportunity to be standing out here.